cabin sat buried beneath snow so deep it swallowed the steps leading to the porch. And the man renting it told himself the silence was normal, that winter always erased sound, that the forest wasn't watching him settle in, that the way the door creaked open by itself was just swollen wood reacting to cold. But the smell inside wasn't cold wood or dust, it was warm, stale, like breath trapped too long in a closed room. And when he shut the door behind him, the sound didn't echo, it was absorbed, as if the walls were padded with something soft and listening. That night, the power died at exactly 2:17 a.m. Not gradually, not flickering, just gone, and in the dark he heard footsteps upstairs, even though the cabin only had one floor. Slow steps, careful testing the weight of each board, stopping whenever he held his breath, continuing when he exhaled until the steps reached the ceiling directly above his bed, and stayed there unmoving for hours. In the morning, he found footprints in the snow, circling the cabin. Barefoot, deep, human, but they never approached the door, only paced around the walls like something measuring the space inside. And when he followed them, they stopped abruptly at the tree line, as if whoever made them had simply stood up and disappeared. The second cabin belonged to a couple celebrating their first winter alone, miles from the nearest road, where the snow fell so thick it erased the horizon. And the woman noticed immediately that the windows didn't reflect them properly, that her movements lagged half a second behind, that sometimes her reflection didn't move at all, and when she mentioned it, her partner laughed. Until he waved at the glass and watched his reflection stare back, motionless, eyes slowly widening. That night, something knocked from inside the walls, not scratching, not banging, but knocking, polite and rhythmic, moving room to room, stopping outside the bedroom door, knocking 3 times, waiting, knocking again, until the sound came from the other side of the bed, from inside the closet, and when they opened it, they found frost coating the hanging clothes, shaped like fingerprints gripping fabric. They left before dawn, but the woman swore the cabin didn't shrink in the rearview mirror, that it stayed the same size no matter how far they drove. And when they finally reached the highway, the man checked the mirror and said the cabin was gone, even though she could still see it standing behind them in the road, blocking the snow. The third story came from a ranger who refused to return north after one winter assignment. A man who cataloged cabins abandoned decades earlier, each one marked by a date carved into the doorframe. The same date no matter when they were built, and inside every cabin he found the same thing, a single chair facing the window. Frost patterns on the glass, shaped like faces pressed close, and journals left open to the last entry, all ending with the same sentence written in different handwriting. "It's warmer when it watches me." The final cabin was supposed to be empty, listed as condemned, inaccessible after heavy snowfall. But a hiker found smoke rising from the chimney in mid-January. Steady and calm, and inside he found the table set for dinner, plates warmed to the touch, chairs pulled out, and the sound of breathing coming from beneath the floorboards, slow and satisfied, like something full. When rescue teams arrived days later, they found the hikers' footprints leading into the cabin, but none leading out. And new ones circling the walls, barefoot, deep in the snow, pacing, waiting, as if the cabin had finally found someone willing to stay. And if you ever find a winter cabin that feels warmer than it should, don't check the fire, check the walls, because something inside has already noticed you noticing it. I've always dreamed of a perfect winter getaway. You know, a cozy cabin, snow falling outside, a warm fire crackling. So last winter, I finally did it. I found this gorgeous, secluded cabin online, deep in the mountains, hundreds of miles from the city. The pictures looked like something out of a postcard. It was advertised as the ultimate escape, a place to disconnect and recharge. So I booked it for a long weekend, packed my bags, and told my friends I was going off-grid for a few days. The drive up was stunning, with winding roads through snow-covered pine forests. When I finally arrived, the cabin was even more beautiful than the photos. It was this classic log construction with a big stone fireplace and huge windows looking out over a frozen lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It felt absolutely perfect, like I had found my own little piece of heaven. I was so excited. I brought in my supplies, got a fire going, and settled in for what I thought would be a peaceful, relaxing retreat. Little did I know, that feeling of peace was about to be shattered. The first night was fine, totally normal. I made dinner, read a book by the fire, and fell asleep to the sound of the wind howling outside. It was the second night when things started to get weird. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard it. A faint tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like it was coming from the back of the cabin, maybe a branch hitting a window. I told myself it was just the wind and tried to ignore it, but it kept going, getting a little louder, a little more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. It didn't sound like a branch anymore, it sounded like someone was knocking. I sat up in bed, my heart starting to pound. Who could possibly be out here in the middle of nowhere, in the dead of winter? I grabbed my phone to use its flashlight, and crept out of the bedroom. The living room was dark, except for the dying embers in the fireplace. I walked to the back door, my hand shaking as I reached for the peephole. I held my breath and looked through. Nothing. Just darkness and swirling snow. I felt a wave of relief, but also confusion. Was I just hearing things? I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I just laid there, listening. For a while, there was silence. Then, I heard a different sound. A scraping noise. It was coming from right under my bedroom window. It sounded like metal dragging against the wooden exterior of the cabin. Scrape, scrape, scrape. My blood ran cold. This wasn't the wind. This was something else. I was too terrified to look out the window. My mind was racing, thinking of all the horror movies I'd ever seen. I was alone, miles from the nearest town, with no cell service. I'd told everyone I was going off-grid, so no one would even think to check on me for days. The scraping stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving me in a terrifying silence. I spent the rest of the night, huddled under my blankets, jumping at every creak and groan of the old cabin, waiting for the sun to come up. As soon as the first light hit the sky, I was out of bed. I had to know what made that noise. I cautiously pulled back the curtain of my bedroom window and peered outside. And what I saw made my stomach drop. There, in the fresh snow right below my window, were footprints. But they weren't human. They were long and thin, with strange, deep claw marks at the end of each toe. And next to the footprints were long, deep gouges in the wooden wall of the cabin, right where I'd heard the scraping. It looked like something had been trying to claw its way in. That was it for me. I didn't even pack. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and my phone and sprinted out to my car. I didn't look back. I just drove, my heart pounding the entire way down the mountain. I didn't stop until I hit the main highway and saw other cars. I have no idea what was out there that night. The rental company said it was probably just a bear, but the footprints didn't look like any bear tracks I've ever seen. Whatever it was, I know one thing for sure. I will never, ever rent a remote cabin in the woods again. My dream of a perfect winter getaway turned into a complete nightmare. So if you're ever thinking of a secluded escape, maybe think twice. Sometimes, being a little closer to civilization isn't such a bad thing. Some cabins aren't empty because they were forgotten. They're empty because people were scared away. Picture this. A cozy log cabin, nestled deep in a snow-covered forest, miles from the nearest town. It sounds like the perfect winter getaway, right? But what if the crackling fire isn't the only sound you hear at night? What if the whispers on the wind carry more than just the chill? Today, we're reventuring into the heart of the winter wilderness to uncover terrifying true stories from abandoned snow cabins. These aren't just tales, they're warnings. Our first story comes from a group of friends who rented a remote cabin in the Colorado Rockies for a ski trip. It was called the Whispering Pines. The first night was perfect, no, falling gently outside, warm inside. But as the fire died down, they started hearing it. A soft scratching sound, coming from inside the walls. They dismissed it as mice. But then the scratching turned into tapping. Rhythmic. Like Morse code. It moved around the room, from one wall to another. Then, the whispers started. Faint at first, like the wind, but they grew clearer. A child's voice, humming a lullaby. Terrified, they huddled together until dawn. When the sun came up, they found something etched into the frost on the inside of a window. Get out. They packed their bags and left immediately, never looking back. Locals later told them a family had vanished from that cabin decades ago, leaving everything behind but their young daughter, who was never found. Next, we traveled to the snowy mountains of northern Japan, a place known for its heavy snow and isolated villages. A solo hiker named Kenji decided to take shelter in an old, seemingly empty cabin during a sudden blizzard. He was exhausted and just grateful for a roof over his head. He managed to get a small fire going and was drifting off to sleep when he felt a sudden, intense cold. The fire had been reduced to smoldering embers, as if something had smothered it. He sat up and saw a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a tall, gaunt woman in a tattered white kimono, her long black hair covering her face. She didn't move, she just stood there, radiating an unnatural cold. Kenji was paralyzed with fear. He couldn't scream, he couldn't even breathe. The woman slowly lifted her head, and through the strands of her hair, he saw her eyes. They were completely black. She took one slow step towards him, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. That's when Kenji's survival instinct kicked in. He grabbed his pack and burst out the door, running blindly into the raging blizzard. He has no memory of how he made it back to civilization. Only the image of those black eyes burned into his mind. Our final story takes us to the vast wilderness of Canada. A couple, Mark and Sarah, bought a rustic cabin as a fixer-upper, dreaming of a quiet life. The work was hard, but they were happy. Until the nights came. Every night, exactly at 3 a.m., they would be woken up by the sound of an axe, chopping wood outside their window. At first, Mark would get up, grab a flashlight, and check. He never found anyone. No footprints in the snow, nothing. They tried to ignore it, but the chopping grew more frantic, more aggressive each night. Then, they started finding deep axe marks on the cabin's exterior walls, appearing overnight in places they couldn't possibly reach. The final straw was when they woke up one morning to find the words, "My cabin," carved into their front door with what looked like an axe blade. They sold the property for a loss, and moved back to the city, forever haunted by the sound of that phantom axe. These isolated places hold secrets, and sometimes, those secrets don't want to be disturbed. The silence of the snow can be deafening, but it's what you hear within that silence that will truly terrify you. So next time you see a charming, snow-covered cabin in the woods, just remember, you might not be the only one checking in.